Apache girl whispered to the loner rancher, "Please, I need a man's warmth." The ranch sat far from town, stretched wide under an open sky that felt bigger than anything else in the world. Dusty fields rolled into low hills, and fences ran long and crooked like they had grown tired over the years. This land had belonged to the rancher's family once, but now it belonged only to him. Most days, the wind was his only companion. At night, the stars watched silently as he moved through his routines. The rancher was a quiet man, known by a few people in the nearby town, but close to none of them. He spoke when needed, nodded more than he talked, and kept his thoughts to himself. Folks said he was kind, but distant. Others said he was lonely, though no one dared to say it to his face. Loneliness to him felt like an old coat, worn, heavy, but familiar enough that he no longer noticed it most days. He woke before sunrise every morning. The alarm clock rarely had a chance to ring. Years of habit pulled him from sleep as the sky slowly changed color. He would sit on the edge of his bed for a moment, listening to the silence, then pull on his boots and step outside. The air was usually cold at that hour, sharp and clean, and it cleared his head better than coffee ever could. His days followed a steady pattern. Feed the animals, check the fences, fix whatever had broken overnight. Eat simple meals, often standing, sometimes forgetting to taste the food at all. He liked it that way. Routine kept his mind from wandering into places he did not want to visit, places filled with memories he had learned to lock away. The house was small, older than him, and held the quiet of a place that had not heard laughter in a long time. Dust settled quickly, no matter how often he cleaned. The walls were bare except for a few framed photos turned face down on a shelf. He told himself it was easier not to look at them, easier to let the past rest. When he went into town, it was only for supplies. He bought what he needed, paid in cash, and left before anyone could pull him into small talk. The store owners greeted him politely, but they did not push. Everyone knew he preferred it that way. He never stayed long enough for anyone to ask real questions. Not far from his ranch, beyond a stretch of rough road and dry land, was reservation territory. Life there was harder than many outsiders realized. Jobs were scarce. Help came slowly, if at all. The young Apache woman lived there, though lived felt like too strong a word. She moved from place to place, staying with relatives when she could, sleeping on couches, sometimes in her car when there was no other option. Her life had been shaped by loss early on. Family troubles, broken promises, and long stretches of feeling forgotten had taught her not to expect much. She was strong in ways people did not always see. She learned how to survive, how to stay quiet when needed, and how to keep going even when hope felt thin, but strength did not erase the cold inside her. Some nights the silence felt heavier than hunger. She missed warmth, not just physical warmth, but the kind that comes from being understood, from knowing someone cared whether you made it through the day or not. She carried that ache with her everywhere, hidden behind calm eyes and careful words. She often walked alone, thinking, listening to the wind, feeling tied to the land in a way she could not explain. Her people had lived on this ground for generations, and even though her life felt unsteady, the land itself felt familiar. It did not judge her, it did not ask questions, it simply existed. The rancher had seen her once or twice from a distance before they ever spoke. A figure walking along the road, head slightly bowed, moving with quiet purpose. He noticed her because she reminded him of something he could not name. A kind of sadness that did not ask for attention, but was there all the same. He told himself it was none of his business. Everyone had their own troubles. He had learned long ago that getting involved often led to pain. Still, the image stayed with him longer than he expected. At night, when the house was too quiet, he sometimes found his thoughts drifting back to that lonely road. Meanwhile, she had heard about him too. People talked even when they thought they weren't. A man alone on a ranch, keeping to himself, fair in his dealings, not cruel, not careless, just distant. To her, distance felt familiar. Almost comforting. People who kept their space were less likely to hurt you. Winter crept in slowly, colder than usual that year. The nights grew long, and the roads turned rough. For the rancher, winter meant more work, more repairs, more reasons to stay busy. For her, winter meant more danger. Cold nights, unreliable shelter, fewer places willing to help. She tried to stay strong, but exhaustion wore her down. Each day felt heavier than the last. She told herself she would find a way through, just like always. Still, there were moments when the weight of everything pressed so hard on her chest that breathing felt difficult. Both of them, living separate lives, carried the same quiet truth. They were alone, and neither of them had planned for it to last this long. The rancher rarely admitted his loneliness. even to himself. He told himself he liked the quiet, that he was better off this way. But sometimes in the evenings he would sit on the porch longer than necessary, watching the sky darken, listening for sounds that never came. No voices, no footsteps. Just the wind moving through dry grass. She, on the other hand, knew exactly how lonely she was. She felt it in her bones. She felt it when no one called, when days passed without anyone asking how she was doing. She had learned to survive without comfort, but that did not mean she no longer wanted it. Their lives were moving toward each other slowly, quietly, without either of them knowing it yet. Two people shaped by loss, standing on the same wide land, breathing the same cold air, carrying different stories, but the same need to feel human again. Either of them could have guessed how one moment, small and unexpected, would begin to change everything they believed about themselves, about trust, and about what it meant to find warmth in a world that often felt cold. The sky darkened early in the afternoon, and the wind picked up speed, pushing dust and cold air across the open land. Clouds rolled in thick and heavy, covering the mountains in the distance. The road near the ranch grew quiet, empty, and rougher with every passing hour. The young Apache woman had been trying to get to a nearby town that day. She needed supplies and hoped to find short-term work. Her car was old, unreliable, but it was all she had. At first, the drive felt normal. Then the engine made a strange sound. She slowed down, hoping it would pass. It didn't. A few moments later, the car stopped completely. She tried again and again to start it, her hands shaking from the cold and stress. Nothing worked. The wind cut through her thin jacket, and the sky promised worse weather soon. There was no signal on her phone. No houses nearby. Just land and silence. The road stretched empty in both directions. Panic tried to rise, but she forced it down. She had been through hard moments before. Still, this one felt dangerous. Night would come soon, and the cold was already biting. Far off in the distance, she noticed a fence line and, beyond it, a cluster of buildings. A ranch. She hesitated. Asking for help had never been easy for her. Too many times it had come with judgment or disappointment, but standing alone on a frozen road was worse. She locked her car and began walking toward the ranch, each step heavy against the wind. Her boots were worn and the ground was uneven. By the time she reached the gate, her fingers were numb and her breath came out in sharp clouds. The rancher had been repairing a fence when he noticed movement near the road. At first he thought it was an animal. Then he realized it was a person. Someone walking toward his land in the middle of a storm. His first instinct was caution. Living alone taught a man to be careful. Still, something about the slow, determined way she walked made him pause. She didn't look threatening. She looked tired. He walked toward the gate as she reached it. For a moment they simply stood there, the wind howling around them. She pulled her jacket tighter and looked up at him. "My car broke down," she said quietly. "I didn't know where else to go." Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed how close she was to giving in to fear. The rancher nodded once. "Come inside," he said. "It's too cold to stand out here." He didn't ask questions. He didn't stare. He simply opened the gate and led her toward the house. That alone surprised her. People usually wanted explanations. He didn't. Inside, the house was warm but plain. A fire burned low in the stove. The air smelled faintly of wood and coffee. He handed her a blanket without a word and pointed her toward a chair. "Sit. I'll make some tea," he said. She wrapped the blanket around herself, feeling warmth slowly return to her hands. For the first time that day, she felt safe enough to breathe fully. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It felt calm, like neither of them needed to rush. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, cups warming their hands. Outside, the wind continued its angry song, but inside, the world felt smaller and quieter. "My name's Daniel," the rancher said after a while. She nodded. "I'm Lena." That was all they shared at first. No long stories, no heavy details, just names. It felt like enough. He offered her food, simple soup and bread. She ate slowly, grateful for every bite. He pretended not to notice how hungry she was. That kindness stayed with her. When the storm worsened, Daniel told her she could stay the night. The roads would be unsafe, and her car could wait until morning. He offered the spare room, clean but rarely used. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. She meant more than just the shelter. That night, neither of them slept much. The wind shook the house, and thoughts kept their minds busy. Daniel lay awake, listening to the storm and wondering why having someone else under his roof felt so strange, and yet so natural. Lena stared at the ceiling, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. She didn't know this man, but she felt no fear, only a quiet awareness that something important had shifted. Morning came pale and cold. The storm had passed, leaving the land covered in frost. Daniel helped her check the car later that day. The problem was clear. It wouldn't be fixed quickly. "You can stay another day," he said. "No rush." She hesitated, then nodded. "If that's okay." Not deeply at first. The land. The weather. How winter felt longer out here. They worked together quietly. She helped in the kitchen. He handled chores. There was no pressure, no awkwardness. Later, sitting outside with mugs of coffee, the conversation slowly grew more personal. "I don't talk much," Daniel admitted. "Been alone a long time. I understand that." She didn't explain right away, but he could hear it in her voice. The understanding felt real. As hours passed, they shared pieces of themselves. Not everything. Just enough. She spoke about moving around, about how hard it was to feel steady. He spoke about losing family, about choosing solitude because it hurt less than hope. Just listening. By evening, the ranch no longer felt like a stranger's place to her. It felt calm, solid. And Daniel noticed something else too. He felt lighter, like the weight he carried had shifted just a little. Their meeting had not been planned. It was not dramatic or loud. It was quiet and simple, like most important things in life. Two lonely paths crossing not by choice, but by chance. Neither of them knew what would come next. They only knew that, for the moment, they were no longer facing the cold alone. The third evening arrived quietly, without warning. The sky turned soft gray as the sun slipped behind the hills, and the cold returned gently, not as harsh as before. The ranch felt different now. Not louder, not brighter, but fuller, like the space itself had noticed that two people were sharing it. Lena stood by the window, watching the land stretch into the distance. Frost sparkled on the ground, and the air looked sharp and clean. She held a warm mug in her hands, but her thoughts were restless. Staying another day had felt right at first, but now emotions she had kept buried for a long time were starting to rise. Daniel sat at the table, fixing a loose strap on his gloves. He worked slowly, carefully, like he always did. But tonight, even he could sense the change. Silence had always been his comfort, but now it carried something else. Unspoken feelings. Waiting. Dinner was simple. They ate together, not across from each other this time, but side by side at the small table. Their shoulders did not touch, yet the closeness felt real. They talked about ordinary things, how cold the nights had become, how long winter still had to go. Still, something deeper sat just beneath their words. Afterward, Daniel added more wood to the fire. The flames flickered, sending shadows across the walls. Lena watched the fire, then glanced at him. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. Her hands tightened around the mug. "You okay?" Daniel asked gently. She nodded at first, then shook her head. "I don't know," she said honestly. He didn't push. He just waited. She had spent her life learning how to stay quiet, how not to ask for much. But something about this place, about this man who listened without judging, made her feel like she could speak. "I don't usually talk about things like this," she said softly. "I don't want to be a burden." Daniel looked at her then. Really looked? "You're not," he said. "You don't have to carry everything alone here." She stared at the fire, blinking back emotion. "I've been moving for so long," she continued, "from one place to another. Always temporary. Always feeling like I don't belong anywhere." Daniel stayed quiet, giving her space. "Most days, I tell myself I'm strong," she said. "And maybe I am. But strength doesn't stop the cold. It doesn't stop the quiet at night." Her voice trembled slightly now. "I don't mean just the weather," she added quickly. "I mean inside." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Her words echoed feelings he had never put into sentences. He knew that cold. He had lived with it for years. "I chose to be alone," he said after a moment. "Or at least I told myself I did. It felt safer than losing people again." She turned to look at him. "Does it still feel safe?" About the empty mornings, the long nights, the sound of the wind replacing voices. "Sometimes," he said, "but sometimes it just feels empty." The fire popped softly, breaking the silence. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, not for warmth, but comfort. Daniel noticed and stood, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle her. He placed another blanket nearby, not touching her, just offering. She took it and whispered, "Thank you." The house felt very quiet again, but not lonely. just heavy with things finally being said. "I don't want to disappear," Lena said suddenly. "I don't want to keep feeling like no one would notice if I was gone." He had felt that same thought before, late at night, sitting alone on the porch. "I noticed you," he said simply. She looked at him surprised. "I saw you walking that road weeks ago," he continued. "You looked like someone carrying too much." She gave a small, sad smile. "You were right." "I don't need saving," she said. "I just need to feel human sometimes. To feel seen." Daniel nodded. "I get that." She hesitated, then spoke more quietly, as if afraid the words might break something. "That night, when I said what I said, I didn't mean it the way it might have sounded." He met her gaze, steady and calm. "I know. It was about wanting warmth, safety, being close to someone who doesn't disappear." Daniel let out a slow breath. He felt honored by her honesty, but also careful. He knew how fragile moments like this could be. "I don't want to take advantage of your pain," he said, "and I don't want to use mine as an excuse either." She nodded quickly. "I'm glad you said that." They sat there, two people facing the truth of their loneliness, not trying to fix it all at once, just acknowledging it. Lena wiped her eyes and gave a small laugh. "Sorry. I didn't mean to unload everything." "You didn't," Daniel said. "You shared." "There's a difference." That made her smile more fully this time. Outside, the wind moved gently across the land. Inside, the fire burned steady. Daniel poured more tea, and they sat closer now. Not touching, but no longer distant. "I don't know what happens next," Lena said. "My life has never been very planned." Daniel looked around the room. The house. The ranch. The quiet he had built around himself. "I don't either," he admitted. "But I know I don't want to rush anything. Not feelings. Not decisions." She nodded. "That feels right." They talked about memories, not the painful details, but the things that shaped them. She spoke about stories her grandmother used to tell, about the land and its meaning. He spoke about growing up on the ranch, learning responsibility too young. At one point their laughter filled the room, surprising them both. It felt good. Real. Later, when it was time to sleep, they paused at the hallway. The air felt different now, lighter, but also careful. "Thank you for listening," Lena said. "Really? You're not alone tonight." She nodded, holding on to those words as she went to the spare room. Daniel stayed up longer than usual, sitting by the dying fire. He thought about how close he had come to closing himself off completely, how easy it would have been to ignore that broken car, to stay distant. He realized something important then. Warmth didn't always come from closeness of bodies or quick choices. Sometimes it came from trust, from listening, from letting another person be real with you. In the other room, Lena lay awake, staring at the ceiling again. But this time, the silence didn't feel so heavy. Her heart still carried pain, but it also carried relief. She had spoken her truth, and it had been met with respect. For the first time in a long while, she felt calm. That night marked a turning point for both of them. Not because everything was suddenly fixed, but because something honest had been shared, something fragile, handled with care. Outside, the stars watched over the ranch as they always had. Inside, two lonely lives had shifted, just enough, toward understanding. Morning came slowly, as if the land itself did not want to rush. Pale light crept through the windows, touching the wooden floor and the quiet furniture. The ranch woke up the same way it always had, but Daniel felt different. He stood by the sink, holding a mug of coffee he had already forgotten to drink, thinking about the night before. He was not used to opening up. He had spent years building walls that felt strong and safe. Now, with just a few honest words shared by the fire, some of those walls felt thinner. Not broken, just softer. And that scared him a little. Lena woke up with the sound of birds outside the window. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the memory returned. The ranch, the fire, the quiet talk. Her chest felt tight, not with fear, but with something else. Caution, hope, both at once. She sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. She reminded herself not to expect too much. Life had taught her that hope could be fragile. Still, she could not deny that she felt steadier than she had in a long time. When she walked into the kitchen, Daniel was already there making breakfast. Eggs, toast, nothing fancy. He looked up and gave a small smile. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. They moved around each other easily, like people who had known each other longer than they had. But both of them were careful, respectful. There was no rush, no pressure to define what they were or what this meant. After breakfast, Daniel suggested they take a walk around the ranch. The weather was cold but calm. The sky was clear, and the land stretched wide and quiet. They walked side by side, boots crunching softly on the ground. "This place is beautiful," Lena said. "Lonely, but beautiful." Daniel nodded. "That's a good way to describe it." They stopped near a fence line, looking out over the fields. The wind moved gently, carrying the smell of earth and dry grass. "I've spent most of my life here," Daniel said. "I used to think this land was enough." "And now?" Lena asked. He thought for a moment. "Now, I think land can't answer back. People can." As they walked, they talked about the future. Not plans, not promises, just possibilities. Lena spoke about wanting stability, a place to stand without feeling like she might be pushed away at any moment. Daniel spoke about wanting peace without isolation. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said. "But I also don't want to rush into something that isn't healthy." "I feel the same," she said. "I've made choices before just to escape being alone. I don't want to do that again." They reached a quiet spot near a tree, its branches bare against the sky. They stopped there, not touching, but close enough to feel the shared warmth of presence. "This is the hard part," Lena said softly. "Knowing what you want, but also knowing what you need." Daniel nodded, and knowing the difference. The day passed slowly. They worked together, fixing small things, cleaning, preparing food. There was comfort in shared effort, no one trying to impress the other. Just two people being useful, present. In the afternoon, Daniel received a call from a mechanic in town. He listened, then hung up. "Your car can be fixed," he said. "It'll take a couple of days." Relief that her problem had a solution. Sadness because a solution also meant change. "That's good," she said. "Thank you for helping." "You don't owe me anything," Daniel replied. She looked at him carefully. "I know, and I appreciate that." That evening, they sat outside as the sun went down. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep blue. The land seemed endless and quiet. "I should probably think about what comes next," Lena said. Daniel felt the weight of those words. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I want it to be your choice, not because you feel stuck or pressured." She nodded. "That matters to me, more than you know." The kind of silence that felt full, not empty. "I've been thinking," Daniel said finally, "about boundaries." She turned to him. "Okay, I care about you," he said, carefully. "But I want to make sure that care doesn't turn into something confusing or hurtful. I want that too. I don't want to offer you comfort that keeps you from finding your own strength," he continued. "And I don't want to lean on you in a way that replaces healing with distraction." Her eyes softened. "That's very thoughtful. I want to be rescued. I want to stand on my own. But I also don't want to pretend I don't need people." Daniel smiled slightly. Needing people doesn't make you weak. They both knew this conversation mattered. It was easier to avoid hard talks, but they chose not to. "So," Lena said gently, "maybe what we're doing right now is enough. Being honest. Being kind. Letting things grow slowly or not at all, depending on what's right." Daniel nodded. "That sounds right." That night, the house felt calm again. Familiar, but changed. Daniel noticed he wasn't dreading the quiet anymore, and Lena noticed that the quiet didn't make her feel invisible. Before heading to their rooms, they paused in the hallway. "I'm glad we talked," Lena said. "So am I," Daniel replied. She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for treating me with respect." He met her eyes. "Thank you for trusting me." They went to sleep with lighter hearts, not because their problems were gone, but because they had faced them honestly. Lena packed her things slowly. Daniel helped without saying much. They shared coffee one last time before she left for town. At the door, Lena stopped. "I don't know what the future looks like," she said, "but I know this moment mattered." She smiled, then turned and walked toward the road. Daniel watched her go, feeling a quiet mix of emotions. Sadness, yes, but also something new. Respect, peace, a sense that he had done the right thing. As the dust settled and the land returned to its usual stillness, Daniel realized something important. Warmth did not always mean holding on. Sometimes it meant knowing when to let go, with care. And Lena, driving toward an uncertain future, felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not rescued, not lost, but strong. Strong enough to keep going, carrying with her the memory of kindness, honesty, and a moment when two lonely lives chose respect over fear. The ranch stood quiet again under the open sky, but it no longer felt empty. It felt changed, just like the people who had shared its space, if only for a little while. Days passed after Lena left the ranch, and the land slowly returned to its usual quiet rhythm. The mornings were still cold, the wind still moved across the fields, and the animals still needed care. On the surface, nothing had changed, but inside Daniel, something was different. He noticed it in small ways. He no longer rushed through his mornings just to avoid thinking. He no longer sat at the table staring at nothing after meals. Instead, he found himself pausing, reflecting, remembering conversations he had once been afraid to have. The house felt quieter again, but not empty in the same painful way. The silence now felt honest, not heavy. It reminded him of something important. He was capable of connection. He had not lost that part of himself after all. He returned to his routines, but with a lighter heart, fixing fences, feeding animals, watching the sky change colors. These things felt meaningful again. Not because they had changed, but because he had. Sometimes in the evenings he would sit on the porch and think about Lena, not with longing or regret, but with respect. He admired her courage. It took strength to leave comfort and walk back into uncertainty. He knew that well now. He also thought about his own choices. For years he had believed that staying alone protected him from pain. But now he understood something deeper. Avoiding connection also meant avoiding growth. Warmth, he realized, did not always come from holding on. Sometimes it came from allowing change. Meanwhile, Lena's journey was not easy, but it was hers. The road back to town felt long, and her future felt unclear. Yet something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt invisible. She stayed with a relative for a short time, then found a small room to rent. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. She found work where she could, nothing permanent at first, but enough to keep going. Each step forward felt small, but together they formed a path. On difficult nights when doubt tried to creep in, she remembered the ranch, not as a place she wished she had stayed, but as a reminder that kindness existed without conditions, that honesty could be gentle, that respect could feel warm. She began to speak up more, to say no when something didn't feel right, to say yes when opportunity came without fear. She was still learning, still healing, but she was no longer standing still. Weeks later, Daniel received a letter. He hadn't expected one. He rarely did. The envelope was simple, the writing neat, but careful. He recognized it immediately. Inside, Lena wrote about her life, about the job she had started, about learning to trust herself again. She thanked him, not for shelter or help, but for listening, for not taking advantage of her weakness, for showing her that strength and kindness could exist together. She ended the letter by saying she hoped he was well and that no matter where life took them, she would always carry that time with gratitude. Daniel folded the letter slowly and placed it in a drawer, not hidden but safe. He didn't need to reread it often. Just knowing it was there was enough. The seasons began to change. Snow melted. Grass returned. The land breathed again. Daniel noticed that he smiled more easily now. He spoke a little more when he went into town. Not much, but enough. People noticed the change, though no one asked, and Daniel didn't explain. Some things didn't need explanation. Lena, too, noticed changes in herself. She felt stronger standing alone than she ever had while clinging to temporary comfort. She made new connections, carefully, slowly, with clear boundaries. She didn't rush. She didn't hide. Sometimes she walked alone, feeling the land beneath her feet, remembering stories passed down through generations. She felt connected again, to her roots, to herself. Months later, their lives crossed briefly once more, not in a dramatic way. Just a simple meeting in town. They spotted each other from across the street and paused. They talked for a few minutes. About work, about the weather, about life. There was no tension, no sadness, just mutual understanding. Before they parted, Daniel said, "I'm glad you're doing well." "So am I," Lena replied. "And I'm glad you are too." They walked away in different directions, both carrying quiet peace. The lesson of their story was not about romance or rescue. It was about timing, about choice, about understanding the difference between need and connection. Both of them had learned that warmth does not always mean staying. Sometimes it means meeting, listening, and letting go with care. And in that understanding, they found something lasting. Respect for themselves and for each other, and the strength to keep moving forward, one honest step at a time.